The Red Sox are set to begin a brand new series against the Pittsburgh Pirates tonight, which means we have a really fun crossover episode with Locked On Red Sox and Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I am your host, NESN's Lauren Willand, and it's a very exciting episode today. I am joined by Locked On Pirates host Ethan Smith, as well as former Locked On Red Sox host Gabrielle Starr, as we kind of talk all things baseball. We talk the trade deadline, what the Red Sox have and haven't done, and how there's kind of some similarities between the Red Sox and the Pirates in terms of their prospects and how they are developing them and everything in between. And of course, we are going to preview this series. And the best part, this is a two-part episode, folks. So we are so excited to bring you part one. We'll get into that right now. We have a very special episode of this Locked On Red Sox, Locked On Pirates crossover. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see former Locked On Red Sox host and my friend Gabrielle Starr. She's going to be joining us today as we talk all things baseball, not so much Pirates. Sorry, Ethan, the host of Locked On Pirates. He's having a very sad year, but the Red Sox are going to play the Pirates. So we should touch on that, just kind of all the momentum is in the Red Sox favor. Just took 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. Everyone just seems to kind of be clicking right now. The team is getting healthier, which is a good sign. People are starting to come back. And I've said this before on the show that the Red Sox need to take advantage of these series against bad teams. They need to beat up on these teams and start building a run. They're not that far off out of a playoff spot. They're very close, and they can get some ground against a bad Pirates team.
Yeah, I'm not even going to disagree with it anymore. I love that most of the Locked On hosts are like, yeah, no offense, Ethan. I'm like, I'm not even going to take offense to it anymore when my own front office doesn't want this team to be good. So I went off about that on my episode yesterday with Gary Morgan about the ineptitude of the front office that has just been constant, terrible decisions. I mean, when a guy's batting 186 and he's still on your roster full of a bunch of young kids, what message are you really sending to your fans? And, of course, the best Pirates host on the planet, Ethan. Stanley Smith, of course.
Just to cheer you up, the Red Sox also have at least one player who's batting under 200 on the roster. Everybody right now is freaking out because Kevin Plawecki's hitting 163, and he has a 228 slugging percentage, and he is our main catcher.
Yeah.
Could you name the Pirates catcher right now?
No.
I think that says enough. So me and a bunch of the guests that I have on the show most of the time, we're like, that catcher is starting today. We don't even name them anymore because they're just there's so many of them at this point. So we're just like, oh, Jose Godoy is playing. Oh yeah, he's just that catcher. So at this point, that's the point of the season the Pirates are at. For the Red Sox, like you said, you guys have the momentum going into this series. You beat the Yankees 2 out of 3 games, something the Pirates can also claim to their credit, shockingly. So you're welcome, Boston fans, for that earlier this year. But again, when you look at these two teams, Lauren, and I wanted to ask you specifically, what is exactly the disconnect for the Red Sox in terms of where they're at currently versus where they could be, which is a playoff spot? I didn't know what way to really present that. It's just like they're not bad, but they're not where I remember the Red Sox being last year at this time last year, where World Series was on their mind. And now it's, how do we survive in the playoff race?
I think there's a disconnect here between front office and the players on the field. And I think it stemmed from the trade deadline, essentially, when you trade your starting catcher. And then all of a sudden, it's like Chaim Bloom panicked and was like, oh, I don't know which way to go. So we're just kind of going to stay the same spot that we're at, going to get some prospects, some big league ready players, and not really make the team better, but not make it worse. So I think there's that kind of disconnect where there's frustration, there's confusion about, do you believe in this team? Does front office want us to be a contender this year? before Christian Vasquez got traded, they asked him if he thought Chaim Bloom believed in this team, and he said, I don't know. And then a few days later, he shipped out of town. So I just think there's no real direction for this team, and it causes frustration among all the players, especially the leaders on this team, the Bogarts, the Devers, the JD Martinez. And it just sends a bad message where you have the opportunity to bolster your team, to bolster your bullpen, which you just did not do at the trade deadline. And just, like I said, you didn't make this team better. You didn't make them worse. You just you didn't choose a direction to go. And I think it just caused players to be like, so what are we doing? What kind of team are we?
And what direction did you want them to go in, if you don't mind me asking? I mean, the Pirates were pretty clear. We were selling. Like, that was like what we were doing. But what direction at the time did you say, okay, this is the direction they should go, that would have made the most sense and been the most consistent direction?
Once they traded Vasquez, I was convinced they were sellers. And I was like, you don't trade your starting catcher. No, he's not the biggest name on this team, but he is your starting catcher. He's homegrown talent. He's a leader. People respect him. Fans respect him. So I was like, they're definitely selling. And then they just kept bringing players in, and I was like, they're not sending anyone out. They didn't send Evaldi. They didn't send Martinez out. I was like, what the hell is going on? So I thought they were going to sell. I thought they should have sold once they traded Vasquez, but I'm not in charge of making those decisions, and maybe it's for the better. I don't really know.
And I can give you and Gabrielle solace looking ahead to the series, that the series the Pirates just wrapped up against the Giants were, ironically, 2 games under 500 when the series started. I believe it was 3, actually, but brought themselves above or at 500 near series end after a sweep. The Red Sox are 57-59, 4.5 back. I will agree here. The Pirates are awful right now. They were awful. Gabrielle will probably laugh at this. They were awful when she was the host of this podcast for the Locked On Red Sox. They're still awful now. They're still making the terrible decisions they keep deciding to make. I mean, again, your best pitcher on the roster is not on the roster, and he's not hurt. He's in AAA, wasting his arm away. The rookie NL leader in home runs, and Jack Sawinski, is also in AAA. So they're sending a message that they're awful. So the Red Sox here just need to take advantage. That's what I would say. They just need to take advantage. But what has kind of stopped them from taking advantage of beating teams like my Pirates team that arguably, I'm not going to disagree here, should just lose these 3 games?
It's just been a tough season, like overall.
Yeah.
Like they can't figure out their chemistry. They can't figure out how to beat bad teams. And it's been a problem all season. So, I mean, I don't have any answers. Maybe Gabrielle does, but it's just been such an annoying season after coming 2 games from the World Series 10 months ago.
We'll get you right back to our Locked On crossover episode with Locked On Pirates Ethan Smith and former Locked On Red Sox host Gabrielle Starr just as soon as I tell you about Built Bar, because if you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There is a new flavor. It's delicious. There's cookie dough. It's covered in chocolate like every other Built Bar, and Built Bar has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, at least my new favorite. Cookie dough chunk puffs have a light, chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, which is a weakness of mine. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're only 160 calories. They have 15 grams of protein. They're the perfect snack for when you're on the go. If you need something while you're running errands, before the gym, after the gym, they are the perfect snack. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, which is my favorite, or just need to grab a quick bite to eat. It's the perfect protein bar. They taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, the fat, and the sugars, and grab yourself a Built Bar. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your order. That's code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, and we'll start with something that I was told by like a very reputable source in about March, April. Basically, there were 2 things that kind of pre-derailed and then derailed like the season. The first was that they didn't think JD Martinez was going to opt into the final year of his contract. And because he did, it changed how they were planning on spending money. last winter. Dave Dombrowski, I spoke with him at spring training, and that's my dog behind me with the cone. Dave Dombrowski, I spoke with him at spring training, and I asked him about the Kyle Schwarber signing because the rumors were that they were very close to signing him before the lockout. And he basically confirmed that. He's like, we almost signed him in November. And then they like held off. But the point is, the Red Sox were never like in the Kyle Schwarber thing, as much as Chaim Bloom wants to say otherwise. Like, he was going to the Phillies. That was just going to happen. And I'm not saying like the Red Sox should have signed him over somebody else, but his production is clear, and you trade away Hunter Renfroe and you don't replace Kyle Schwarber, and you're literally losing like 60 home runs. Like, I don't really know how you can excuse that. I'm a big JBJ fan, but and I will say the injuries, especially to like Kike Hernandez, Chaim Bloom admitted that changed how they plan to use him. They were going to use him in very specific situations based on like pitcher batter matchups. You know, he's very good at Fenway Park offensively, pretty much terrible almost everywhere else. That changed because other players got hurt. So they were forced to play him more than they planned to. That's not really his fault. I still don't agree with releasing him because now he's on the Blue Jays and he's going to be playing against us next week at Fenway Park, his favorite place to play. So that's great. And their Sox are paying him to do it. But that was the first thing, was the JD thing kind of messed up their offseason plans. And then Tristan Casas, I have this on good authority. I was told that the plan was if Casas started the season in AAA and was good for like the first month or two, they were going to call him up. They were going to trade Bobby Dahlbeck. Casas got hurt, so they couldn't do that. And that led to the Red Sox trading for Eric Hosmer at the deadline, which, let's be honest, yes, the Red Sox had talked to the Padres in the past about Eric Hosmer, but really that trade fell into Chaim Bloom's lap. Basically, he said no to DC, and the Padres were like, crap, now we need to find somewhere else to put him. Let's pay somebody else to take him. And the Red Sox were like, I guess we'll take him, even though he's under contract for like 3 more years, and you have Casas like champing at the bit in AAA. So what are you going to do then? So it's just kind of a very perplexing offseason and season. You know, you pay Trevor Story, and even when he was healthy, he was underperforming his contract, which isn't a surprise because he came from Coors Field and he had the worst year of his career last year. And you give him Xander Bogaerts money instead of just giving Xander Bogaerts money or spending the money on pitching that's not in its mid to late 30s, early 40s. And, you know, what are you doing? Like, Chaim Bloom last year, it felt like he often strikes gold and every once in a while it's a dud. This season, we realize, no, what actually is happening here is every once in a while he strikes gold, but most of the time it's like needles in a haystack, and most of it's haystack. Because, I mean, you can't acquire Michael Wacha, Rich Hill, and James Paxton, all who have either current or previous injuries in their history and are of an advanced age for their sport, when you also are dealing with Chris Sale injuries, and Nathan Eovaldi also has a bad injury history. Like, that's not how you can spend your money. So I think basically from what I've been told, the consensus in the clubhouse is like, what are you doing? This isn't the Rays. You don't have the farm system to sustain 3 pitchers in like their late 30s, early 40s who get hurt, plus literally everybody else. I mean, yes, freak injuries happen. Sox have had a bunch of them. But in general, this isn't a team, clearly, we saw it for the last 2 months, that can sustain with their minor leaguers what happens at the big league level. And it's like, you know, I think overall the issue is that the way that Chaim Bloom is running the Red Sox is he's running them like the Rays. Yes, he spent money on Trevor Story, but A, that money should have gone to Devers and Bogaerts, first of all. And B, he ignores kind of the intangibles about Boston sports, team leadership, clubhouse energy, because that's not a factor in Tampa. Tampa doesn't have intangibles because their players are there for so short of a time before getting traded for more prospects that they don't have time to build intangibles. Meanwhile, the Red Sox, it's all about history. It's all about camaraderie. It's all about energy and vibes. And like, I don't think he gets that. And I think that's why all of these decisions are coming to a head in such a bad place. And I know that was a whole rant, but I'm like very hyped up on coffee and I'm frustrated because I'm not going to pretend I know how to be a GM, but I will say that as a person who can look at things very logically, his decisions don't make sense to people who have been around this team for their entire lives. His decisions make sense to him because he comes from the Rays. But the Red Sox are very much not the Rays. And if you have something like the 5th highest luxury tax allocations in baseball, your team should be winning. And they're not because you spent the money the wrong way. And yes, a lot of the money is Dombrowski money that is expiring, Nathan Eovaldi, JD Martinez, Chris Sale after next year. That's Dombrowski money. But I mean, most of the pitchers on the team now are Chaim Bloom acquisitions. And, Garrett Whitlock, like before they gave him that extension, he was like a very affordable deal. So it's not like you can blame guys like him. It's, paying a guy like James Paxton who hasn't pitched all year, banking on him being good again when he does come back, which may be this year. And if not, they gave him a 2-year club option for the next 2 years, even though he hasn't been good in like 4 years. That's a Rays move. That's not a Red Sox.
We are having a grand old time here on Locked On Red Sox and Locked On Pirates. We'll get right back to our crossover episode just as soon as I tell you about BetOnline, because betonline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, which both are returning very, very soon, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the online source for all of your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the action that's happening right now. That's BetOnline, where the game starts.
Move.
I think a lot of this too is the Red Sox and their fans. They went from Dave Dombrowski, who would make the move to get the player he wanted, to Chaim Bloom, who is not going, he's going to make smaller moves. And I've said this all season, that he's treating this team like the Rays. Gabrielle, you just said that too. And it's mind-boggling because you have the luxury tax, you have the storied franchise, you have fans that you have not been giving transparency to since you got here. And it's becoming really annoying for the most part because all fans want is transparency. Why'd you trade Vasquez? Why did you trade this? Why'd you acquire this person? And there's just no transparency there from Chaim Bloom, from the front office. And the more the moves he makes, the more I'm like, I don't understand, because the Red Sox fans don't have patience, especially after almost reaching the World Series, coming from within 2 games of the World Series. And you go out, you should have a good offseason. You don't, whatever. And I know that there's money tied up in JD Martinez, but there are other ways to get players that should be here and that maybe you let go. Like to this day, and I'm probably going to die with this on my headstone, I don't understand why there has been no bullpen help since last year at the trade deadline. Not one. Not one.
Lauren, not even last year. Not even last year.
No.
Go back to the 2018 postseason when Alex Cora used his starting rotation for over 13 innings of relief work. Yep. How was that not an indication that this team's bullpen? I wrote this 5 years ago. I wrote this last year. This team, to me, like, yes, you've had incredible closers. Keith Folk, Koji, Kimbrel, not in 2018, but in 2017. You've had incredible closers. But what this team has never really had in the new era of like short starting pitching and deep relief needs, this team has never had deep relief needs. And you look at like the Braves, who the Sox just played. And like they freaking activated Kirby Yates from the injured list. He had Tommy John. He hadn't pitched in 2 years. They activated him from the injured list like the second day of the series. And the day before, the Sox had gone into extra innings with the Braves, and their bullpen was like Raisel Iglesias, Kenley Jansen. Like, I'm like, how do you have arms on arms on arms? And it's like, why didn't the Red Sox go for Raisel Iglesias at the deadline? Yes, the Angels had given him a 4-year contract extension, so the Braves just took on a lot. But like, you have tens of millions of dollars coming off the book at the end of this season and more next year. You're telling me you don't want a good pitcher like Iglesias locked in for a pretty affordable price for the next 4 years? Why? What is the point? I mean, this goes back to the whole race thing. You don't get a trophy for having the best, most stocked farm system. Everyone gave Dave Dombrowski crap in 2019 when the farm system was decimated and the starting rotation wasn't healthy, so they weren't repeat contenders. But you know what? Now he's come full circle to being the hero again. It's like the whole Batman thing. You either die a hero, live long enough to see yourself become the villain. He's now being reincarnated as the hero because people are like, damn, remember when we had a GM who spent money? And they're not wrong, because the point is, you build up a farm system to either develop those players or to use them to get proven players. And the Rays don't do that. The Rays develop players, trade them for more prospects, and lather, rinse, repeat. And you don't do that in Boston. You can't do that in Boston because you will have fans rioting outside on Jersey Street. Like, it's not an acceptable business practice here. And I know that sounds snobby. Like, I'm very well aware, and I'm sure Lauren is too, 4 championships in 15 years, the most since 2000. I'm not even saying like I want a championship. I'm saying I want the team to be run competently in a way that indicates that you know what you're dealing with in Boston, because we're not like other markets.
No.
And I'm not saying that in like an elitist way, because I think that more markets should be like us. I wish every market was as driven to championships as Boston has been in the last 20 years, because that would make the sport better as a whole. I wish every market had rabid fans. I wish that every front office spent money, because then baseball would be better. I'm just saying that that's not the current situation in Major League Baseball. And you can't run a big market team like the Red Sox the way that you run the Tampa Bay Rays, because people will not accept it.
And it's funny too, Lauren, that she brings that up, is because the divide between the Pirates and the Red Sox, okay, both of these teams are below 500, but the divide is, if the Red Sox were 45-70, I don't know if Boston would be standing as a city if they were 45-70. No. For the Pirates, though, and like you brought up the discrepancy in like the last 20 years, the Pirates, for me, it's like I've seen 3 seasons where they competed and won 1 game in a wild card game, and that was considered a success for that team over the course of 22 years. And the thing that scares me is I hear Red Sox fans and a lot of other fan bases talk about, I wish this is how things were. As a Pirates fan, the thing that's scaring me, and I think a lot of Red Sox fans may forget this, but Ben Cherington is the general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I'm sorry, but he is showing me absolutely nothing right now that he did in Boston. And I get it. A team fell into his lap in Boston. I'm sorry. I don't know if that offends anybody in Boston, but that team fell into his lap proverbially. It really did. And he gets to Pittsburgh, and Gabrielle, you elaborated on this. Farm systems don't win championships. The Pirates right now, that's what they're building their entire network on, is all of this stuff with the prospects. It's like, these guys are going to come up and do this, right? You brought up intangibles. You can't develop intangibles in Boston if the guys don't play, and if you get rid of them too quickly. Same thing in Pittsburgh. How do prospects ever get better if you don't play them? Like with the Tristan Casas thing, he got hurt, but also as a organization like Boston is, have your backup plan in place already. Like, you guys have the value of saying, okay, we can go spend money and have a backup plan. The Pirates, as I mentioned to you before about who's our catcher, when Roberto Perez went down at the beginning of the year, I knew that this was going to happen because they have no plan whatsoever. So I think the one comparison between the two teams right now, neither of them is running in a way that makes sense. The Pirates a little bit more than the Red Sox, because at least the Red Sox still have that little small chance of making the playoffs. But transparency in baseball across all 30 teams, like, again, as Gabrielle said, some markets just they don't aspire to win. That's how some owners are. Like Oakland right now. Oakland already knows they're on their way out. They're going to move eventually. But be transparent about it. Just say if you're going to rebuild. Or in Boston's case, we don't think the bullpen needs fixing. Okay, cool. You say it. You know they need it. But if you say it, it at least makes it better than just silently not fixing it at all.
It also doesn't help with the Red Sox having really good prospects, really strong prospects, and a lot of them getting called up before they're ready. No fault of their own because of these injuries, and there is that no plan B. Your plan B was Franchi Cordero at first base, and that's a terrible plan B. So
sorry, I just peed my pants a little bit at that concept.
It's wild that. And again, no fault of Tristan Casas. That he sprained his ankle was much worse than they anticipated. And you take your time with him. He could have taken all season to rehab if it meant he was going to be 100% to be ready for the big leagues. But we have Brian Bayo up here, who's going to be a fantastic MLB pitcher, but he can't get into a groove right now because he's not ready. And he was lighting it up in Worcester. He was going through the minors like wildfire. And you have him up here. You have all these other players. You had Jalen Davis up here. You had Jeter Downs up here. You had all these players that just were not ready. And they're good prospects. They will pan out in some way, shape, or form. But again, this goes to Chaim Bloom not getting proper help, whether that's the bullpen, whether that's a plan B kind of thing. And even with now Kike Hernandez out, he could have been a plan B for second base, but he's been hurt. So you take away an infield option and an outfield option, and it's just a giant mess.
I think, you know what, this is a long-standing issue with them too. I mean, Alex Cora said this yesterday that Aaron Boone keeps joking that whenever Rafael Devers plays against the Yankees, he turns it up like Brooks Robinson defensively, which he's obviously being sarcastic. Brooks Robinson won something like 16 Gold Gloves. Rafael Devers is almost never a plus defender in his 5-year career. But the thing is, one of the reasons for that is because in 2017, that was their first season without David Ortiz. And for some reason, they were like, you know what? Let's just see how this team does if we don't try to replace David Ortiz. And you know how it went? They finished last in the American League in home runs. They called up Devers before he was ready because they needed bat power. That's also why they got Eduardo Nunez, which is hilarious in hindsight. But the reason that Devers came up then is because the team needed help, not because he was ready. And that's been the case for the Red Sox for most of the last 5 years, is that you don't see it. It's not like a Bobby Witt Jr. with the Royals where the Royals aren't even good. So it doesn't matter. It's like that he's ready. Or Wander Franco with the Rays, where the Rays are always kind of good, they're never World Series champions, thanks to Kevin Cash with Blake Snell, but they're not. It's about players being ready versus a team in need. And this whole season, Josh Winkowski's been pretty great, honestly. The numbers might not reflect that entirely, but I was at 2 of his games where he was phenomenal. And, Brian Bayo was unreal in AAA this year, but he got called up because other people were hurt. And then you get mad at him. People were making fun of him because he said he wants to be better than Pedro Martinez. And it's okay, your first start as a major league pitcher does not reflect how many players had bad debuts. How many players, David Ortiz wasn't David Ortiz with the Minnesota Twins, and now he's David Ortiz. The idea is you're ruining prospects because you didn't build a strong enough roster. I will say the sheer number of injuries is kind of impossible to plan for. You know, we're not talking like one starting pitcher goes down and one reliever goes down. We're talking like there were like 15 players on the injured list at the same time, and about 10 of them were pitchers. There is almost no team in the majors that could withstand that kind of combined impact at the same time.
Yeah.
But the roster was never constructed for really any kind of impact. And we saw that pretty early on in the season, to the point where I thought that they were going to sell at the deadline simply because there was no way to fill all of the holes that they needed to fill. And it bothers me because you're messing with player development. And it's like, well, Chaim Bloom, that's your whole thing. You literally come from the Rays. So you know better than anybody how important it is to not mess with player development. And you need to construct a roster that can somewhat withstand at the major league level injuries. And he did not do that. A lot of it is stuff like Story getting hit by a pitch, Sale getting hit by a pitch, not Sale riding a bicycle, but Sale getting hit by a pitch. You know, there are things, certain injuries are just freak accidents, but a lot of it is just poor roster planning. And there's no excuse for it because you are over the luxury tax and your team has sucked for most of the season.
We hope you enjoyed this crossover episode with Locked On Pirates Ethan Smith and former Locked On Red Sox host Gabrielle Starr. It was such a fun episode. Love talking baseball with those two. Thank you for tuning in today. We cannot wait to come back on Wednesday. Hopefully talk about a Red Sox win. Be sure to follow, rate, review, and subscribe to Locked On Red Sox right here on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast is where you can find us. Find us on Twitter at LO_Red Sox, Jake at Jake Iggy. He will be back Wednesday. And me, Lauren, 3 Laws, Lauren with 4 R's. Be sure to follow Ethan, Locked On Pirates, and Gabrielle all on Twitter as well. They're all wonderful follows. And now that you have made Locked On Red Sox your first listen, be sure to head on over to Locked On MLB to make it listen number 2. Paul Francis Sullivan, just call him Sully, good friend of mine, friend of the pod, friend of the Locked On Network, brings you his unique perspective using humor, using knowledge to provide unique insight to the major leagues, both past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, just like Locked On Red Sox is where you can find Locked On MLB. Have a wonderful day. We will see you Wednesday. And as always, let's go Red Sox.